There's a lot going on in this movie.
It was like I was watching it for the first time.
I like this movie.
It has a special place in my heart.
Very close to my heart.
This was a good one.
I want to like this movie.
What? Seriously?
I loved it.
Very flat, kind of boring.
This movie blows me away. This movie turns me on.
Terrible. It is terrible. All these keys everywhere. Influences, baby.
Huge fan.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Hello out there in YouTube and podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys. We talk about horror movies here, science fiction films, and those unique elements that often lift them above, but definitely separate them sometimes when they don't go so far above. I am here with my good friend, David Horton. He is our co-host. David and I have known each other a very long time. And David and I have been talking about horror and science fiction movies since we were kids. And we basically shortly before the pandemic decided we should start doing this again on a weekly basis, but we'll just do it for everybody. And that's what this podcast grew from. But now it is also a YouTube channel. So you're either watching us visually or you're listening to us, but you're getting to hear our expertise and sometimes ridiculousness about these films. And I am here and joined with David right now. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. And it's always exciting to get together and do this every week. And we usually start with, what have you done in your genre week? So what have we done that has
a little icebreaker?
A little icebreaker for all of our people who are returning. You can just fast forward if you don't like this and just go to the next section. Anyway, but I delved into your genre this week because I've got this enormous list that either I have compiled and or you have added to. So keep looking for it and keep trying to catch up on it, but it's constantly expanding. But this is one I wanted to do just because of last year working on the Nosferatu Awakens and the vampire play and everything else that I was working on. I wanted to get into
nasty big pointy teeth.
So I watched Abagail, the movie that had been announced. I think you did a Coming to Get You on it on our YouTube channel. And so it interested me then, and I thought it was very interesting and had it on my list. So finally sat down and watched it. Basically, for those of you who don't know, it is the simple plot. A group of criminals kidnap a young ballerina, the daughter of a hugely wealthy conglomerate mega guy, probably working in the underworld or in the mafia, some figure that we don't really see. Anyway, they kidnap her, take her to this remote retreat, and they're going to try to ransom her. Little do they know that she has a unique condition, and instead of them holding her hostage, she holds them hostage. If that had been... You haven't seen this, have you?
I have not, but I love the story. I love the concept. I think it's a good concept.
Agreed. So I don't want to give stuff away to you.
I mean, if you hate it, I don't care.
It's not that I hate it. It's that this is a great example of a could have been movie.
Oh no!
Because what I just said as a synopsis would have been great had the trailer also fulfilled that, and you would have had this turn about 35 minutes into the movie that would have freaked audiences out. But instead, everybody wants to see this movie because, I want to see the vampire ballerina. And if you didn't know that going into it, because the whole first literally 35 minutes is a huge character study. These are like 7 people, criminals, all with a past. None of them are using their real names. They're not allowed to use their real names. They're not allowed to tell anything about themselves. And they're all working together for the first time. So how well do they do their jobs? That's the lock picker. That's the muscle guy. That's the smart guy, yada, yada. And then what do we do? All we know is we're supposed to get this girl. We're supposed to keep her for 24 hours, and then we get our money. And it's a caper movie, and it's filmed pretty well, and it's told pretty well.
Dan Stevens in it.
Yeah. The girl is the lead, Melissa Barrera. I'd never seen her before. She plays Joey. She's really the lead in it, but he's the secondary.
Okay.
It's directed by Matt Bettinelli Olpin, who I had never heard of before, but you probably have because he did the reboot for Scream. The Scream.
Yes. And those movies, we talked about this not long ago, as far as reboots of series, I would put those in the better ones than the Pet Sematary or whatever. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if he's not a writer because he's not credited as writing this one. This guy has 2 directors and 2 writers for this. So it's already going to have some, I already can tell it's going to have some friction or some stuff that doesn't work, which is very true in this. This movie really falls apart about 2/3 of the way through.
Okay. I think they pair up for all their movies. I want to say that not only the Scream movies, they may have done that Ready or Not movie.
Ready or Not. Is that the, we're hunting you?
Yes. The bride, I don't know. Yeah. It's like a wedding custom or something. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a horror movie too. Then they did the Scream movies, I think. And now they did this. I'm pretty sure it's the same guys. I can double check.
I'm pretty sure it is too. Same 2 stories. The writers I'd never heard of before either. And again, I think they plotted it badly. I think marketing released it badly because it could have been a really cool surprise and scary. As far as vampire mythos goes, it doesn't contribute anything. It doesn't help anything. It doesn't detract really. It's just, it's there. The only thing that you will like is, and if we were doing it for keys, I would say one of the biggest keys for this is The Boys, because Buffy in the 90s introduced, if you stake a vampire, they burst into dust. We even called them, I'm gonna dust these vampires. So if you stake it, they immediately bust. In this one, it's The Boys. As soon as you stake them, it's a explosion of blood everywhere. And the last 20 minutes of this movie, the lead characters look like Bruce Campbell in Evil Dead.
Evil Dead. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Covered in blood, which is fine. And the gore effects work and the characters work. It's just that the plot falls apart really quickly near the end.
That sucks.
And yeah, but I would recommend it. I think it's definitely worth a watch. It actually might be good for us to put on our list. And it was called Abagail. And the tagline for it I liked, which I never knew, which is "Children can be such monsters," which was a cool little tagline. So
yeah, it is a tagline. I've never heard that.
In my genre week, that's what I did.
Well, that's interesting because I went away from horror.
What?
And you went towards horror, which is unusual for both of us. I watched a little movie from 1968 called Targets.
Targets. Okay. Is that familiar?
Are you familiar with this?
Not at all.
Are you unfamiliar? Okay, gotcha. I misunderstood you. This movie I have been hearing about my entire life. I have seen it on videotape shelves when they were, you could rent them in the 80s, but I never got it.
Mm-hmm.
It's mainly a suspense film, and the 2 things it's mainly known for are being one of Boris Karloff's last films and being Peter Bogdanovich's first film. So guess who it's produced by?
I don't know.
Roger Corman.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, Roger, we've talked about how he was a schlock filmmaker most of the time, but he produced a lot of talent, and Peter Bogdanovich is a talent. He had the chance to make this movie for Corman because Karloff owed Corman 2 days worth of work. So Corman told Bogdanovich he could make this film provided he used Karloff and stayed under budget.
Okay.
In addition to Karloff being in this movie, to use him more than the 2 days he had him for, he incorporated clips from the movie The Terror into this movie.
Okay.
The Jack Nicholson
Yeah.
terror movie that was actually shot because of House of Usher, if I'm not mistaken, because they had those set pieces. So it's like
Hmm.
a movie that made a movie that made a movie because of circumstances,
Foreman
basically.
was so good at that.
He
I've
was.
got this set up. The carpenters aren't taking it down for 2 more days, so let's shoot a movie.
Right. And Bogdanovich, I'm pretty sure, wrote this as well. And he was smart, thinking, oh, I can use clips from this horror movie if I make Boris Karloff a horror movie actor in this movie that's known for horror movies. So
Oh,
he could
okay.
start this film with the terror, then you realize they're watching it in a projection room because it's like clips from dailies or whatever. Anyway,
Okay.
too much information. The cast is great. It includes Bogdanovich himself. He plays a part in it. Karloff and a guy named Tim O'Kelly, who I really don't know. The synopsis is, and this is going to sound scary to you because it's familiar. After an unhinged Vietnam vet, Bobby Thompson, kills his wife and mother, he goes on a brutal shooting spree. Starting at an oil refinery, he evades the police and continues his murderous outing at a drive-in movie theater where Byron Orlock, a retiring horror film icon, is making a promotional appearance. Before long, Orlock, a symbol of fantastical old-fashioned scares, faces off against Thompson, a remorseless psychopath rooted in a harsh modern reality.
I like the synopsis. That sounds great.
Right. And I just talked to you before we started recording about a movie called Badlands where Martin Sheen and Sissy Spacek go off on a shooting spree.
Mhm.
Actually, not Sissy, but Martin does. Anyway, this movie's better than that.
Wow.
Also, because
Okay.
Peter Bogdanovich directed it, I enjoyed this movie more. It scored 89% on Rotten Tomatoes with 36 reviews, and it is on the 1001 movies you must see before you die.
It is?
It is. Probably because it's Bogdanovich's first film.
I would think that would be the only reason,
Right.
but interesting.
But it was
Wow.
also released shortly after, it came out in 1968. So it was released shortly after Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy's were shot. So it didn't do well at the box office for those reasons, probably.
Hmm.
So it was a commercial failure, but critics have come around since then to appreciating
Interesting.
it. So anyway, I just thought I'm going to watch this damn movie. I've been wanting to watch it for decades, and I finally sat down and watched it, and it's not that bad at all.
Wow. Hmm. Sat down and watched this movie for decades and finally
It's
did.
about targets. It's
Oh,
called Targets.
Targets is a good thing since both of our movies today have targets that are really, really large and big and doing. For those of you who don't know what we're doing, why are you listening to this particular episode? But we are doing a double feature today. We have started doing those a few seasons ago. And today we are covering two movies that have it's probably our strongest version of a double feature ever, other than doing like a movie and a remake of a movie. I can't
You're
remember if we've
telling me
done
that
that.
this is better than Friday the 13th, part one and two?
Part one and two. Yes. Well, no, those are sequels, and these are essentially
Oh, I see
based on
what you mean.
this is essentially two different genre versions of the same story, essentially, pretty much.
If I had to address it, I would equate it with the sister double feature to what we did last year with On the Beach and the Day the Earth Caught Fire.
On the beach.
It's
Yep. Yep.
very similar in theme to me.
Actually, good. Yeah, that's a good key for our own. That's a meta key for us.
Yeah, exactly.
We are covering 1964, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, and Sidney Lumet's Failsafe. Brief synopsis of both, and I can probably condense it together. Basically, it's a man against machine doomsday story. Both of them are about the military in general, the politicians on the side over here, and the actual practical soldiers in the field. One aboard a fighter squadron, one aboard a bomber. But a mechanical or personal error creates a situation where these military soldiers get the order to go and drop bombs on the Soviet Union. This is during the Cold War, height of the Cold War, 1964. We had just had the Cuban Missile Crisis in 62, so it was big on everybody's mind. And in the story, the rest of the politicians and the military fight within amongst themselves in trying to recall and stop these soldiers from carrying out the orders that they have been trained and dedicated to carrying out. Neither of the movies ends in a good way. If you have not seen them, go watch them right now, and because we'll be doing some deep dive and some details and spoilers, of course. But
Well, and they were both made in the 60s, folks. So if you haven't seen them, then we're not going to feel too guilty about it.
right. Both came out in the same year, both in production at the same time.
Yeah.
So both from the same studio.
I was negative 1 years old.
So had you seen both of these before?
No. I have seen.
Really?
No, I have never seen Failsafe, and I have seen Dr. Strangelove, but I want to say, if you're wanting a first encounter, I'm pretty sure it's one of those movies we watched at Dee and Rodney's. And if you remember right, those were always parties where watching movies was not very logical because people were talking and socializing and partying, and it was just really hard to follow. Not to mention, I'm not big on comedies. Of course, that's latter perspective.
Yeah. Well, I think we should probably cover them in order of release, but we'll probably overlap. So just everybody get your notepads out or whatever.
Oh, okay. Because I thought we were going to do Failsafe first, but okay. That's fine.
I think we should do them in order of release just because that was a hugely studio political issue with the making of the movies.
Right.
So Strangelove itself has certain, or Dr. Strangelove, the film, has certain things about it, trivia about it, whatever. Directed by Stanley Kubrick, written by Stanley Kubrick and Terry Southern, based on a book called Red Alert by Peter George, which came out in 1958. And that becomes a bone of contention with Failsafe 2. Produced by Columbia, filmed in England, and filmed fairly quickly, although Kubrick did spend a lot of time in pre-production for it, like he normally did. This is his only comedy. It is on several lists as one of the best comedies ever made.
Yeah, I thought that was unusual.
And it is a political satire black comedy, would probably be the way to phrase it, or the genre that it's in. It has some incredible cast to it. Mm-hmm. Did you like it? I know comedy's not your bent all the time.
I was afraid I wasn't going to like it. And honestly, I wouldn't probably go out of my way to watch it again, but I was not bored. So
okay,
I enjoyed it. I saw the comedy for what it is. I think I probably more than anything appreciated the performances from George C. Scott, who I don't see enough, and Sterling Hayden, who I don't see at all. Hayden. But yeah, Sellers is great too. He plays 3 parts. He was going to play 4, but he broke his leg and they had to hire Slim Pickens to come in and replace him in one of those parts. Yeah.
Correct. And before we dive in, I guess, so for trivia stuff, that was one of the things that's the first thing on my list, because I've seen Strangelove. This is probably my 5th time watching it. And the whole Slim Pickens riding the thermonuclear missile down or bomb down is such an iconic movie shot.
It is. It's like one of those things we talk about you'd see in a reel at the Oscars.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. You would always see that. Also, the glaring dramatic ending of this, which became a Kubrick staple moving forward, is his endings are very profound. You remember his endings and what he does and the way he did this one. But the first question I had was, why did he cast Sellers in multiple roles? And I don't know if you found that out in your research or whatever.
I did. The studio insisted upon it because they felt that was why Lolita succeeded, because of Sellers playing multiple roles in Lolita.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
He plays two different parts in Lolita, which is another Kubrick movie.
I like Sellers in this, and I like all three of the roles. I just think that it's definitely a framework that makes you realize you're watching a movie,
Mhm.
especially the way it's cut back and forth and back and forth. But his performance is great. I'm sure we'll get to in casting. But that was my first question: is I wonder why he wanted to do that.
Well, and I don't
Um,
know, I cannot remember Lolita. I'm not even sure if I've ever seen the entire thing. But I think that if there's any comedy in Lolita, it's very sparse. And I would say a lot of
mhm.
it has to do with Peter. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, with Peter Sellers. So maybe they sensed this was going a comedy, and knowing this was a comedy going in, maybe they said, "Oh, we need to try this again with Sellers."
Hmm.
So
Well,
that's
still in trivia, part of the lengthy production process for this was that they had intended, since it takes place in the United States and it's a U.S. brigadier general who is ordering this bombing run, they wanted to shoot it in the U.S. and they had plans and all of that. However, Peter Sellers could not leave England. He was going through a divorce settlement and he couldn't leave.
right. Yeah,
So
he was like in trouble.
yes. So they had to switch to Shepperton and film it in the United Kingdom, um, and bring in a bunch of American actors to do it. And great production design for this. I love the war room. I think the design of the war room is phenomenal. Kubrick, in his typical way, insisted that they put a concrete or concrete-esque, concrete appearing ceiling above the war room so that it would force his British lighting director to only use the lights that he wanted, which were the ones in the circle shining down onto the. I read
From
that in.
above, you can see
I
that in that
read.
picture.
Yeah, and I read that in trivia. I thought that was interesting. The only other trivia thing I've got, or production thing I've got, is there was a totally different ending to this movie. Did you read about that in research?
No, I don't think so. If I did, I don't remember.
This movie ended with an 11-minute pie fight in the war room.
Oh, yes, I did read that. I would have hated that.
And they filmed it, they shot it, they started editing it. It was going to be there, and Kubrick at the last minute just said, "This isn't working. This takes my political satire comedy and
It
makes
makes
it a
it ridiculous.
farce.
Yeah.
And this isn't a farce." And also, I guess the last part of my trivia is when he first started and he read the book by George and he and Southern were working on the screenplay. Actually, he was working on the screenplay with George first. Southern came in as like a fixer once Kubrick changed, because the book, Red Alert, is a political thriller. It's a drama. Kubrick, in trying to adapt it into a screenplay, just kept seeing the absurdity of what he called MAD, mutual assured destruction. And he said, they're mad to do this. And he started playing with that phrase. And then, so he's the one that came up with the concept of this should be a comedy, not a drama. And George was pushed aside, and Terry Southern was brought in to add a lot of the comedic moments
Peter
and stuff.
George, the author.
The author, the
I didn't
original.
realize he collaborated. I thought that this was just based on his novel Red Alert, and that I had heard that he wasn't happy with either of the movies.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Well, there's huge litigation with these movies that
Okay.
unfortunately contributed to both of their box office too. So it was, but yes, he was originally collaborating with Kubrick for over a year.
Okay.
And then Kubrick changed the whole mood and said,
Oh, I
nope,
bet
I'm
that
going for a
pissed him
comedy.
off.
And I'm sure he wasn't happy. So,
Ooh.
yeah.
And to bring Terry Southern in, who to me, I feel like Terry Southern's known for one movie, and that is Easy Rider,
Yep.
which is kind of a fluke because Barbarella certainly isn't excellent, cinema. And those are the two movies he wrote. So I'm like, why was Kubrick getting him to help write? Except everybody does die in the end, and they do die in the end of Easy Rider. So maybe Southern wrote the ending. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Went with that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Scenes? Were there scenes that you particularly liked in this one?
I love any of the scenes with Sellers and Ripper in the being locked, confined on the base in that room.
Oh, yeah.
Especially
first-
when he goes and kills himself. because that totally took me by surprise. I was like, holy shit.
My first favorite scene note is that scene, the first time he comes into the room, because it's one shot from over behind the desk.
Right.
And it's like 6 minutes long.
I don't think I have a shot from that.
But,
I don't.
But everything Peter Sellers, his entire character, yes, Jack, I think we ought to consider calling the boys back. He's trying to be so.
He's very John Cleese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you said, yes, the scene after that when he's talking about, I got this gammy leg, Jack, I can't help you there. And he's carrying the machine gun while he goes into the bathroom.
Yeah, there's some very loose ties to Monty Python in this film. I will get to later as well.
Oh yeah, the absurdity too is there. The picture you have above your shoulder is great. I love that entire sequence between
Eli. Isn't that his name? No. Is it not?
No, it's
Keenan Wynn. I was going to say Eli Wallach, but it's Keenan Wynn. You're right.
Yeah. Keenan Wynn and Peter Sellers.
Keenan Wynn's great. I've never thought of him as being threatening, and he is very threatening to me in this movie.
Well, and one of my favorite lines in comedy history is, "You think I keep loose change on a mission?" It's just...
Well, and that's what that kind of comedy works for me too, because it's so deadpan that it's funny.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you also have the other comedy other scenes that you have.
I enjoy any scene with George C. Scott in it. I liked his introduction with the woman in the beds, even though I think they were twin beds, weren't they? They may have been. I can't remember.
Yeah. They were.
But George C. Scott just steals the show if he's in a scene, basically. Yeah. So any war room scene where he is the character speaking, you are locked in.
Yeah, my two scenes I have, and that's what I have next on my list, were his two big scenes. The first one where he's talking about post-war environment, where he's talking about, Mr. President, what I'm talking about is two totally different post-war environments. One where you got 150 million people killed, and one where you got 5 million people killed. That one, and the one where the president is so deadpan and saying, General Ripper or General Turgeson, it's Turgeson, yeah. Could the bomber make it? And he goes off on that big thing about these things are big. They're big. You can see them swooping in, and he's just so good.
I'm hard to believe I don't have a picture of him. I'm wondering if I forgot to upload something. But anyway, sorry.
Well, you always equate George C. Scott with drama roles, with Patton and Turning Down the Oscar, and that one where he's looking for his daughter in the porno industry, and Changeling.
Hardcore, yeah. The Changeling.
Hardcore, the Changeling, all that. You always associate him with these big dramatic roles, and to see him play this comedy, it's great. Mm-hmm. It is so good. And then my last scene would be the ending. I think the ending is phenomenal. Just the way it's that music with all of these actual nuclear explosions. Those are not CGI, that's not special effects at all. Every one of those was a real nuclear bomb that was detonated by somebody, usually us.
Testing, yeah.
Yep. So, and to have that dark of an ending in such a comedy, definitely that defines dark comedy or black comedy.
Right.
So, yeah.
And Lyndon B. Johnson was not happy with him.
Although Lyndon B. Johnson used this entire Cold War plot point to get elected.
Oh.
In my notes, I have one of the things that was so dramatic about Lyndon Johnson getting reelected after Kennedy had been shot and he took over was he did this ad. It's in black and white. It looks like a shot from Frankenstein. It is a young girl in a white dress, and she's kneeling down and she's pulling off petals off a daisy, and she's going 10, 9, 8, and halfway through it, you start hearing a background sound of a countdown, and when she gets to 0 and the voice gets to 0, it cuts to a nuclear explosion. And then it comes up on all this stuff about the Cold War will be the end of all humanity. We've got to stop the Russians, yada, yada, yada. Elect Lyndon B. Johnson.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's pretty
it was
dark.
dramatic. I had not seen it before and watched it in research and went, "Holy crap!" And that's in 1964. Oh my
Yeah.
God! So,
Wow.
so yeah, he did not like. I did have the thing. He did not like this movie. No.
I can move on to cast.
Sure.
If you've got any
Yeah.
more scenes, I couldn't find a picture of George C. Scott. I think something happened when I was making my pictures, and it must have got deleted because I'm sure I had one of him. But oh
Oh,
well.
I'm sure you did.
Most people out there know what George C. Scott looks like. As far as cast, the big cast member, of course, is Peter Sellers. We know him from Being There, one of David's favorite movies, and The Pink
Yep.
Panther, one of mine.
The mouse that roared.
Yeah. He plays three characters. As you said, he was going to play four, but had to bow out of one because he had a broken leg.
Mhm.
He played Captain Lionel Mandrake, the British officer that we mentioned talks to General Ripper. He plays President Muffley, the President of the United States. And he also plays Dr. Strangelove, the wheelchair-bound nuclear war expert and former Nazi that we like to consult with.
Has alien hand syndrome.
Right.
Yeah.
I already mentioned that he played these four roles because the studio's eye saw him as a success because of playing multiple roles in Lolita, which was a successful film, apparently. George C. Scott plays General Buck Turgidson. He's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. As you mentioned, movies of his were Patton, which he's notoriously famous for because he refused the Oscar, and The Hustler. And he was the first actor to ever refuse an Oscar. Brando did it shortly after for The Godfather. So he took, I don't know, he agreed with George C. Scott.
Brando didn't refuse the Oscar, right? He had
He had a Native American go receive it as a protest for the treatment of Native Americans in America. Yes, you're right. I forgot about that. George C. Scott, however, felt that the Academy Awards ceremonies were a 2-hour meat parade and a public display, contrived suspense for economic reasons. And he said he had a hockey game to watch. So.
He was always a man's man. He's probably the only thing I like in Firestarter, even though he's miscast in that role.
But he's cast as a Native American in that role.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
But he's really good in that role. But I just don't like that movie.
Rainbird was his name. Yeah. Sterling Hayden, who I am somewhat unfamiliar with, plays Brigadier General Jack D. Ripper. Yeah, I don't know him that well. He was in The Killing. He was in The Godfather. I've seen The Godfather. I've not seen The Killing. But he is the one that basically hijacks this and creates this controversy or this situation.
Yes.
He was not the first person offered this role. Do you want to know who else was offered?
Who?
Gene Kelly.
That would have been so interesting.
I know. The whole time I was like, "Ooh, I would have really liked to have seen that."
Wow.
Gene could do drama, even though he was known for musical comedies.
Wow.
Yeah. I know. As soon as I read it, I was floored like you are.
Sterling could have had, I think, a much better career than he did. A lot of Westerns. If you were ever a Western fan, you would see him a lot.
Well, he would have had a better career. And we talked about this before in an old episode of Jaws. He was originally cast as Quint, but he couldn't do it because of tax problems. If he had been in Jaws, his career would have been entirely different, I have a feeling.
Oh, yeah. But even before that, he was in trouble because he literally was a member of the Communist Party in 1946. So when McCarthyism took over, they actually hauled him to Washington. And instead of being blacklisted, he named names. He named other people. So he was a little bit of a pariah for a good 10 to 12 years there. This would have been a great comeback for him in 64. And he did do some other stuff after this. Of course, he did Godfather, which he's known for just because he has a great death scene in it, too.
Yeah. Keenan Wynn played Colonel Bat Guano. Love that name. He is the officer who finds Ripper has killed himself and Mandrake is there. and he thinks
Uh-huh.
Mandrake is to blame for all this. Jack Creeley as Mr. Staines. He's the national security advisor. I did not know him, but apparently he was in Videodrome.
I didn't recognize him.
But most people know him from the Police Academy movies, not me, because I'm not into those movies.
Yeah, my next one would be Slim Pickens, because
Yes.
I know him more than most of the other ones. Yeah.
Well, and Slim Pickens played Major T.J. King Kong. He is the bomber's commander and pilot. We know him from Blazing Saddles. I know him from The Howling because he was in that werewolf movie in the 80s. When he showed up, I've got a lot of notes on him. When he showed up on the set, fully dressed as a cowboy and speaking in his thick Southern accent, the British crew thought he was method acting, not knowing that that was how he always dressed and spoke.
That was him. Hey, boys, what do you know? We got one prophylactic.
I mentioned that Sellers was also cast in that role. Other than the fact that he broke his ankle, he also had trouble doing a Texas accent. Two other people were offered the role and either declined verbally or just didn't respond. Would you like to know who they were?
Yes, please.
Dan Blocker from Bonanza declined the role. He said, no, thank you. And John Wayne never responded.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Which, I mean, if you know John Wayne's political history, that makes perfect sense. And I just found that very funny. So I threw that in there. And then this is the last note I have on Slim Pickens that just confounded me. And I don't remember if we talked about it when we did this episode back in season 2, but he was Stanley Kubrick's first choice to play Dick Halloran in The Shining.
Really?
Yeah. So, and Halloran is an African-American character in the book, and Kubrick, I guess, just had a good bond with Pickens and was considering him for the role. I don't know why, but Pickens declined when it was offered to him. And you want to know why?
Yes.
Because he knew that Kubrick was notorious for take after take and said he would never work with him again.
Yep.
And that's exactly one of the reasons Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall and the guy that played Halloran, I can't think of his name now, Scatman Crothers, went nuts because they did do take after take after take on that movie. He literally drove them crazy.
Yep.
So good for Slim Pickens for avoiding that. Peter Bull is the Soviet ambassador. I didn't know him from anything. Apparently he's in The African Queen and Tom Jones, which are big movies. I just don't watch them that often.
Yeah.
But Noel Coward was first offered that role.
Yeah. Again, that would have bordered on farce, maybe. I think that would have gone maybe too far.
But he's like a British theater actor, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
and
what I
playwright.
thought.
Huge playwright.
And then another notable entry is that this is James Earl Jones' debut in films. Yep. He is Lieutenant Lothar Zog, the B-52's bombardier. Of course, we know him as Darth Vader and Mufasa. And then Tracy Reed was Miss Scott's secretary and mistress. And she's the only female character. And she was the Playboy Playmate in June 1962.
And that's actually, that's what I think Kong actually looks at her picture at one point.
Yes.
I think he has the
does.
62 Playboy and he's looking at it. Yeah.
Yes. Barbara Feldon was considered for that role, but she did not get it. And that's really all I have on casting. I have a good bit on awards. This movie was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, even though it wasn't very successful. The critics noticed it. Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Director, and Best Writing on screenplay from another medium. So basically, they did recognize that it was from George's book. Right.
Yeah.
BAFTA nominated it for 5, and it won 3. So the Brits gave Kubrick the awards. The Americans did not. Best Art Direction, Best British Film, Best Film from any from any source, I guess. Screenplay and foreign actor Hayden were the other two. It also won a Hugo for Best Dramatic Presentation. It made the National Film Preservation Board list in 1989 as being significant, and it is on the 1001 movies you must see before you die list.
Of course it is. And like I said, many people have called this one of the best comedies ever made, which I think is possibly because of the restraint in it. This isn't American Pie or Porky's or what is Monty Python even.
Or a laugh track type thing.
The thing that makes the comedy work in this is it's played so real, so straight. Mm-hmm. But even the names, the biggest key for this, of course, is the book, but I've never read the book. So I don't have it as a source material to compare to, but I would guarantee that the names in this movie are not the names in the book.
No, there's no King Kong and there's no
Jack Ripper, you know.
Jack Ripper, exactly.
Mandrake,
which is a root.
Yeah, it's actually an hallucinogenic pagan ritual magic root. So yeah, I looked up turgidson because turgid means excessive embellishment in style and language.
Yeah, I've heard that word.
That's perfect. So, and of course, Merkin Muffley. Really, you got away with that? I guess you did. Any watch notes or last thoughts for this one before we jump into failsafe?
Or keys?
Yeah.
We could do keys for both, I guess. The only thing I have is the one that I was going to tell you is a loose Monty Python connection. Kubrick enlisted Southern to script a sequel called Son of Strangelove. Mm-hmm. He had Terry Gilliam in mind to direct. Yep. The script was never completed. Index cards were laid out and found among Southern's papers after he died in 1995. It was set largely in an underground bunker where Strangelove had taken refuge with a group of women. And in 2013, Gilliam commented, "I was told after Kubrick died by someone who had been dealing with him that he had been interested in trying to do this with me. And I never knew about it until after I died, or he died. And I would have loved to," because Gilliam loves political humor. He's been doing it his entire life. So it would have been a marriage made in heaven if they had done a sequel to this.
Yeah, it would have been interesting. I don't know how successful it would have been. I think it says a lot about Kubrick as an auteur, as a filmmaker, as his lineage in cinematic history that he did this movie, and then his next movie is 2001. To compare these two movies is like, wow, that's a big gap to bridge.
But they're similarly themed when you think about it.
They are.
As far as losing control, either it be to men or machines.
Yep. Yeah. It's very man versus machine thematic carrying through. And it's interesting that it won for production design because the War Room set, of course, was built at the studio. So was the bomber plane because the U.S. government refused to give them any help or assistance at all. So they literally had to look up pictures of bombers and build the set based on that for the bombing run. But everything else, like all the scenes in the offices and everything, those are actually offices at the studio where they filmed it. They didn't build those sets.
And they look like offices.
Yeah. And even the exterior, when they're fighting and shooting at the windows and everything else, and the army's encroaching, that's the office buildings at the studio. So, yeah. My first key for this one,
most of the keys I saw on IMDb, but you go ahead.
I got to give you the first one of this. The inspiration for Dr. Strangelove, the character Dr. Strangelove, who is not, I read, in the novel. So that character is not in the novel, was Operation Paperclip, which was a real World War II operation that also falls into our X-Files.
It does.
For this season. So I thought that was interesting.
Because that's where we recruit Nazi scientists to do, I don't know.
To do our work. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. To do evil
Continue
things.
their research for
do
us.
Their experimentation for us or whatever. Yeah. I've got that the War Room and its recreations
Hmm.
went on to inspire things like movies with superheroes like The Watchmen and X-Men.
Hmm. Yes.
And even what I was thinking, what was the one that came out not long ago where they had, maybe it might have been that Sam Raimi one with Wanda and Doctor Strange, where they had the panel and it was like Mr. Fantastic and one of the
Hmm.
Inhumans and stuff. That looked like a war room set too, as a matter of fact.
Well, and I've got to tie into that. Yes, I think it influenced them. I think it was influenced in design by the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, that very German impressionistic with the weird vaulted ceilings and weird strange angles. And
Yeah, it's
the
more asymmetrical though. That
yeah,
movie is.
but the symmetry doesn't work with the ceiling. Like you got the ring here, but the ceiling does this weird
Mm,
offshoot angle. Plus the fact that you don't see the walls. You see the screens, but not the walls. And that
mhm,
also, in a key for me was Citizen Kane when he's in Xanadu and he's just got a fireplace, a window, and a door, and there's no walls. Everything's
mm.
in black shadow and everything. So yeah, I think scenic design, production design, there's a lot of keys you can trace through for that. I've got, of course, Full Metal Jacket because that's a later Kubrick film that has to deal with war and fighting and shooting and guns and all that. So that
I
just
would
came
add
out.
2001 just because of what we said as far as the similarities too.
Yeah, I would definitely add 2001. There's also several doomsday-y movies. There's and or television. So like the Bedford incident, I put it in my list just because it's another one of those that ends so abruptly because of a man-made accident, and the destroyer actually launches a missile at the nuclear sub. And
With that, you would put in Threads or the day after too.
Threads, the day after, Without Warning. That was a movie that came out in '94, and there was another television one that came out in '84 called Special Bulletin. Special Bulletin was about a guy who takes over a ship in the Bay of Charleston, and he has a suitcase nuke, and he's threatening the government. And at the end of it, he detonates it and takes out
Do you,
most of South Carolina.
do you remember being in school when those type things aired and our schools saying you need to
Oh,
watch this
oh
tonight
yeah,
and like
yeah,
encouraging kids to watch like the day after? It was like part
yes.
of your homework or whatever. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, because especially when I was in school, the Cold War was still going on. It was
Right.
pre-Reagan, and the Cold War was still there. And
Hmm.
yeah, we when these things came out in the '80s and '90s, it was a way to say, remember when? Because we still have nukes. We still have a bunch.
I know. And to me, this is going to sound like an old man speech, but it's like back then they knew that youth should know about these things and know about the
Mhm.
importance of politics and war.
Yep.
And now it's like it's swept under the rug. You don't even see this stuff anymore. Most youth, I don't think, are educated on this type stuff.
Oh no, no, not the nuclear deterrent thing, but we've not mentioned it for a decade or so
Right.
either.
Until
Uh,
Putin came along and started doing some stuff. Yeah.
yeah, but it's more, even with Putin, there's not a real Cold War anymore with Russia. There is with China a little
Hmm.
bit, and there definitely is with the Middle East, since
Right.
both Israel and Iran are nuclear powers.
Right.
So there's that. But no, it's not taught in schools, I think, as much. It's not an immediate threat. They don't have to get under your desk and cover your head to protect yourself from a nuclear blast
Yeah. I mean,
exercises
I wonder,
anymore.
I don't mean to like make light of what kids are taught these days, but I just wonder, are they teaching kids the importance of voting even?
Yeah, true. I think hopefully with this past election, that will be a trend that will continue,
I do too.
and
Yeah.
people will more notice of voting, and more the fact that you do have control of your politics, and less this depression of, oh, we can't do anything about it. Washington's
Mhm.
Washington, we can't do anything.
I have two
Um,
more quick keys that are not mine because I've never seen these movies, so I lifted
okay.
them. The scene where Major Kong rides the missile was apparently inspired by the movie Adventures of Baron Munchausen, not the Terry Gilliam one,
Mm,
One from 1943, where a title character rides a cannonball into a building.
makes sense. That totally makes sense.
And then alongside that, there is a scene with the same scene where Major Kong rides the missile was inspired in a movie from 1942, 1 year earlier, called Hillbilly Blitzkrieg, where Snuffy Smith rides a bomb that has been dropped.
I'm assuming
And
that's a
later,
cartoon.
Edgar Kennedy does the same and waves his hat in a similar manner.
Huh.
So I have a feeling Kubrick knew about those.
Oh, I guarantee it.
Yeah.
And did it.
They're just movies from the 40s and closer to the 60s. So
My last three for this one is Fallout. Fallout became the series, but it's been a series of games and everything else. It's very big on this, the ending aesthetic of this, showing nuclear bombs while you play beautiful pastoral music. All this destruction, and we're hearing, we'll meet again. Don't know why, don't know. I've got 1941, because Spielberg has said that Slim Pickens' character in 41 is a relative of his character in this, like his grandfather or whatever, because he rides the submarine into,
that's
into
right. I haven't
the
seen that
harbor.
movie in so long.
And my last one is an interview I found online with Robin Williams. And he said one of the most influential performances he had ever seen was Peter Sellers in Strangelove, because the three characters were so distinct and so different, and it made him realize the power an actor could have in a movie.
Hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting coming from Robin. So
I added Monty Python because not
yeah.
only is some of the humor similar, but what we just said about playing lighthearted music to tragic events, and they do that well, especially in Life of Brian with the crucifixion.
Oh,
So,
definitely.
right. You said Robin Williams. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to sum that one up and move on, or just sum them
Yeah.
up together.
We can sum up together because I think they're so similar, but we
But
leave
one
the
is
world
not
of
funny.
comedy. We leave the world of comedy
Yeah.
and go to a definite Cold War thriller, 1964, later in the year. I think it was released like right around, it was released in October or something, I think. Directed by Sidney Lumet, called Failsafe. The screenplay was by Walter Bernstein and based on the book by Peter George. And Peter George did collaborate with them on the screenplay, uncredited in the movie.
And back to a tie-in that you were saying, I can't remember who you were saying was a blacklisted artist. I can't remember.
Sterling Hayden.
Sterling Hayden, the actor from the first film. Walter Berenstein was a blacklisted writer.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Just wanted to
Because
make note
he
of that.
again had said that he was a member of the Communist Party in the 40s.
Mhm.
So, and admitted it rather than.
And I had never heard of him, but he wrote movies like Semi-Tough, Yanks, and Annie Hall. So he has done some other fairly well-known movies. Eugene Burdick was one of the writers as well. He did a movie called The Ugly American with Marlon Brando, and I had never seen that, and I watched it during my recuperation period from my surgery. And it's forgettable. It's a Brando political thing.
Yeah. Well, so some pretext to this one. This was being done essentially at the same time. It was not being done by Columbia. It was being done by a different studio. Independently, Sidney Lumet had read a book named Failsafe, which was, like you said, by Eugene Burdick and Harvey Wheeler. He also read Red Alert by Peter George. So they started collaborating on the screenplay and working on it. They got the go-ahead, they got the green light, they went into production for it. Stanley Kubrick found out about it and sued them. Took them to court. It was a big deal, everything else. Ended up, the settlement of it was two things. One, Columbia bought the production and all the rights and everything else so that they could distribute it themselves based on the edict from Stanley Kubrick, which is my movie comes out first. So you can distribute it whenever you want, but Strangelove will come out before Failsafe.
Okay.
And that was a huge problem, I think, for Failsafe. Strangelove was fairly popular. It was very popular with critics, and it was a moderate success box office wise. Failsafe was
Okay.
a total bomb at the box office, but it was great with critics. Had the movies been released in a different order, I think both of them would have been even more popular. If you had seen
I
the drama
agree.
first and then the funny angle of it, but even in interviews and post stuff, if you look up like the making of Failsafe and watch, YouTube videos or whatever, you'll see especially Lumet and Bernstein talking about the fact that nobody wanted to see a heavy drama about nuclear after they'd already seen the comedy of it. And it just didn't play with audiences very well. Even though, my honest opinion, I love Failsafe. I always have. I think it's a great film. It's one of my probably top 30 movies of all time. I
Oh,
don't know how you felt about it.
I liked it a lot. I liked it better than Strangelove, but
I do too.
I guess it would have had a bigger effect on me at a younger age than it does now, though, probably.
Oh, yeah. But for those of you who haven't seen it, again, go watch it, whatever. But the basic synopsis in a nutshell is similar to Strangelove, except in Strangelove, a human makes the decision to start World War III by ordering his bombers to attack the Soviet Union. In this one, a mechanical error sends a group of bombers, Vindicator bombers, to destroy Moscow. And it's all about the attempts to recall and or destroy that bomber group before they first strike against a foreign power.
Yeah.
So it's, again, set in three different places. You have the Pentagon, actually four. You have the Pentagon, you have the bunker below the White House where the president and an interpreter are. You have SAC command headquarters in Omaha, and then you have the bombers themselves, the Vindicator bomber group, and directed incredibly by Sidney Lumet, I thought. I think this movie is extremely well directed.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with him. I am by the name only. I'm not. I mean,
Well,
what
his
else has he
biggest one
done?
that you would know is 12 Angry Men. He did
Right.
12 Angry Men as well, but he also did Dog Day Afternoon, Network, The Verdict.
Okay. I
So, I mean,
definitely know Dog Day and I know the and Network. So
yeah, Serpico. He's
primarily thrillers.
got great cred, yeah. And
Hmm.
he likes both of these movies from cinematography standpoints. One is high contrast black and white, one's low contrast black and white. So you'll notice a lot more white in Failsafe, a lot more black in Doctor Strangelove.
Hmm.
So it's just the way they're shot and lit. They're using two different styles. For an example, going back, Citizen Kane is low contrast, so it's a lot of black. You see a lot of black in the image and in shadow in the back and all this. This has a lot of white in it. And some other cool trivia stuff too, our production stuff about it.
Cool. Like I've already told you that I have not seen this movie. Did you have a first impression? Do you remember when you
I think
saw
the
it?
very first time I saw it was on like a Sunday night movie thing.
Hmm.
And I remember being blown away with the performances, especially Henry Fonda and
Larry Hagman.
Larry Hagman.
Hmm.
But
I was
then,
blown away by Walter Matthau because
oh
I've
yeah,
never seen him play drama.
drama. Yeah. But also with the plotting, the choice and the tension, the way the tension ratchets up from the very beginning all the way through this movie. I remember really liking, and that noise at the end being so scary.
That
And
screech or
yeah,
squeal or whatever it is. It's like a
yeah.
high pitched drone. Yeah.
And just the choice that the president had to make and that sacrifice for society, for humankind. Both of these movies have as their core last act, not a deus ex machina, but a major plot point is that the fear of a doomsday device, a particular device that will instantly or relentlessly annihilate the other side. So in Strangelove, they've built these bombs with a particular radioactive material that will then blow up all of their bombs. So if you hit it once, all the bombs will go. In Failsafe, it's the threat that there are computers that will launch even weeks after the attack. That once they are attacked, they will go into a mode of destruction that will eventually wipe out the entire planet. And both of those fears were huge in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and actually still are, but like you said, they're not taught. Nobody mentions them, everything else. But right now, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of men in silos and in front of consoles and everything else that have the power to launch thermonuclear weapons. Right now, all over the world. And we have never detonated even one missile.
Have a good day, y'all.
Yeah. We have not detonated even one missile similar to the missiles that we have now. We have no idea how much that much megatonnage will do. And I think we talked about it when we talked about, I think last season, when we talked about the day the Earth caught fire. Mm-hmm. We don't know what multiple warheads explosions would do. They could create firestorms that never go out. They could ignite the atmosphere. So everything burns out to a cinder. So yay. Happy day.
Saint, I would say first and foremost, any scene with Larry Hagman and Henry Fonda. Those are the most memorable to me.
All the scenes in the bunkers, yes, are great.
And I've got a question about it. Some of those scenes look to me like they're shot in split screen. Why is that?
It's just the way he frames it. He intentionally framed them balanced on both sides.
But there's a line almost. And it looks like is that a wall juncture, or is that really, were they shot separately?
No, they were in the same room because in production of this, he treated this like a play. They rehearsed for 4 weeks before they shot this movie.
That makes sense.
And he wanted the feel of a live play. So it's the way the lighting is.
I think that's
but also the
balance.
Lighting. It's also the balance that they do. And again, it's a lot of white lighting. You don't have shadows and black behind them. You've got white with a few grays.
Well, and the scenes that I remember it the most, they're actually facing each other. Not like that picture behind me. It's when they're looking directly at each other or on the phone looking at each other. It just seemed like a split screen to me.
It is the first two scenes where they're talking to the Russian premier and they're both on the same type of phone. They're both facing each other and it's a really straight two-person shot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're right. It could look split screen, but it's not. It's really, they are both there.
So those scenes stick out to me big time.
Yes. I think Walter Matthau's first two scenes, the first scene at the dinner party, where he's talking about the only people that will survive are file clerks and bank tellers because they'll be surrounded by all the lead and concrete and everything else, and they would be the first to emerge after the Holocaust. And his first scene at the Pentagon, when he gives them the whole rundown of the current nuclear status. Really good. He's really strong in this movie. And I think the only other time I've seen him play a drama was in, is it Taking a Pelham 123? When he's the head of the train service in New
have
York.
that recorded. I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, I think that's the only other time he really played a great drama character, because Walter Matthau is known for comedy. That's what he
is. And there is one scene in this that confused me. There is a point where he is in the car with that girl in that picture behind me, and she puts her hand on his crotch, and he removes it and says, "I am not like you." And I was like,
kind.
I am not your kind. Is that it? Yeah. And I thought, is he gay? That's the first thing that went through my mind is, really? Because most men wouldn't do that. Most straight men would not do that.
I never interpreted it that way. I always took it as she's a star fucker, and he was the huge hit at the dinner party, so she snuck into his car, and she wants him and everything else, and he's like, no, I'm not your kind, meaning I'm not weak, I'm not that character.
I kind of got that afterwards, but you know where my mind went first.
Oh, of course.
I was
Of
like,
course.
okay. It was just weird. But anyway.
Yeah, I agree with it. Scenes, of course, the pacing and intent when they finally make contact with the Vindicator group. You find out through the plotting, again, spoiler alert, but you find out through the plotting that the reason this all happened was the Russians jammed the signals to the planes. And by jamming them, they didn't get the recall code. So everything was an actual go and they were given a tag. So they go into their normal training, which is to avoid everything, to avoid radio contact, to avoid messages, to not listen because they keep saying the president's voice could be faked, transmission could be faked, whatever. But
Yeah,
at
it's
one point,
basically-
they are supposed to report back to base. This is when the target is in sight. And they have the wife of the pilot on the phone begging him. And he keeps with his training and says, no, they could make anybody.
Well,
sound
it's
like
after
that.
he does that diversion when they try to shoot him down and he uses a missile to deflect it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But the
yeah.
whole intensity of that, cutting to the Pentagon, cutting to the president listening, and cutting to SAC listening, and they're all on the same phone line. And it's just so tense.
Yeah, it's a very tense movie for sure. And it only gets more tense. It continues to, it just doesn't, it's relentless. It doesn't stop.
No,
It just
does
gets-
not stop.
And then when it ends, it's like bleak.
Very.
It's like as
It is
bleak as it can be.
Extremely bleak.
Right. Because basically Fonda, as the president, says to make up for it, since we're bombing unintentionally
Moscow.
your largest city, we'll bomb our own. And he sets sights on New York. And that's where his wife is shopping.
Frank Overton, I think, is the actor. He's the guy that plays he's a Bogan, the big general at SAC.
It is Frank Overton.
And he's amazing. I know him because of that Star Trek episode, but
It's the side of paradise.
yeah, but he is great. And Fritz Weaver is great in that scene. And the scene
And
where
it's Fritz's debut, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
I
really?
think
I
it's
didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's-
it's his first movie. It's Dana Eclair's first movie, and it's Dom DeLuise's first movie. So
Wow.
3 debuts in this movie.
That's excellent.
Yeah, but Fritz is my favorite because of Creepshow. I love him from that movie. I just think
Oh,
he's
yeah, of
fantastic.
course. Well, he's good in everything, but
I guess
in
he got
this
his
one,
chance.
in this one, it's really that's a great sequence when he loses his brains.
Yes, that scene. Yes, where he tries to hijack the situation. Oh wow, yeah, that is great.
And that's the Dom DeLuise scene too, because the General Bogan forces him to tell the Russians how to shoot the planes down.
Yeah, I
And
don't have
you
a picture.
feel the
of
tension of these
Dana.
military officers who their entire career has been, don't give away state secrets. That's treasonous. They're the enemy. And now they're being told by the president, you cooperate totally. Whatever they ask, you tell them. And that's so tense. It is so well done. I love this movie.
Yeah, I definitely like this better than Strangelove, but I think it's also the comedy drama thing. I'm going
Of
to go
course.
to drama always.
Yeah.
So casting, I can just run through the list. I'm not going to say a lot about them because most of these people we know. You mentioned Frank Overton. Dan O'Hurley played Brigadier General Warren. He's one of those faces I know, but I can't really think of what from.
He was the mastermind in Halloween 3, the one that nobody likes. but
I
me.
love that movie, but I haven't seen it in a long time.
Yeah.
Walter Matthau, a very familiar face, plays Professor Groteshell. Is that how you say that? Groteshell?
Huh?
Of course, we know him from The Odd Couple and Sunshine Boys. Lots of Neil Simon, that kind of comedy. He was also in that Goldie Hawn movie, wasn't he? Cactus Flower, maybe. Anyway,
Yep.
Frank Overton. Edward Benz played Colonel Jack Grady, another person from 12 Angry Men. Also
Yep.
Patton, so we have that common. Fritz Weaver, you mentioned, it's his debut. He was in Creepshow and Marathon Man. Marathon Man, which should be on our list now. Henry Fonda plays the President of the United States. He's been in everything, including The Grapes of Wrath, which I just watched for the first time the other day when I was recuperating. Also in 12 Angry Men and On Golden Pond. Larry Hagman, who who'd have thunk that J.R. Ewing would be such an important part in this early film, or the guy from I Dream of Jeannie.
Yeah.
And Larry
Wrapped for I Dream
basically
of
went
Jeannie.
on to become a very famous TV actor. This was a film before that. William Hanson was Defense Secretary Swenson. He was in The Terminal Man, which is another Crichton movie.
Hmm.
And then a lot of these folks I don't know. In these smaller parts, Nancy Berg played Ilsa. And then lastly, Dom DeLuise and Dana Eclair. Dom DeLuise, I have a picture of here, but Dana Eclair people would recognize too. He's a very famous character actor that was in everything in the 70s and 80s, balding, just like Dom DeLuise. Awards. This movie was nominated for a BAFTA for the UN award. I didn't even know there was such a thing. That was for Sidney Lumet. No other awards that I can find. It is not on the 1001 movies you must see before you die. And I think
I don't understand that at
I
all.
don't get that either. And Strangelove is. So
Yeah.
that's what I have for cast and keys, cast and awards.
Unique thing, trivia-wise, this movie
Yeah.
has no music. There is no music in this entire
That
movie.
adds to the drama big
Yes.
time.
It's shot very theatrically. Like I said, he wanted to approach it like a play, similar to 12 Angry Men. So lots of close-ups, intense close-ups, even to the point, there's one point where the president is talking and it cuts to a close-up of his mouth and it cuts to a close-up of his eye. It's just that intense. Lots of shadows, of course, in the high contrast that he's doing. But there's also times where there's total silence. I have in my watch notes, this would never happen in a movie today. And it's right after the big scene where the Kremlin essentially signs off and says, "I'll get back to you when I'm in a safe place," and he hangs up. And it's Hagman over here and Fonda. It's the president and the interpreter, and they each take a drink of water, and they look at each other, and they're looking around, and they're both thinking, and it's like a good 2 minutes, no dialogue, no nothing, and then it cuts.
Yeah, I think the
And
president pours him water
yeah,
in
yeah.
that scene. Yeah.
Hmm. And those kind of character moments of pause and tension and everything just ratchet it up. Scenes when it's just showing SAC quarters and you're just hearing those computers that forever before anybody says anything. And you're just going, oh, it just makes you so tense. It's so cool.
Yeah,
Um,
you mentioned that they wouldn't do that in a movie these days, and
no.
you're probably right, but they should.
Yes.
But I've just been watching a lot of Turner Classic movies, and like you said, people of today, or at least a lot of people of today, do not have long attention spans. And I
No.
think they fear that they will lose people by not giving them something every second when it's the moments of relaxation or the moments of quiet where you can make more impact
Oh, yeah.
than you
And
can with an explosion or something fast moving.
it's plot building, it's storytelling, it's emotional, it's character. All when you take pauses, when you let the scenes breathe, when you have characters that take a moment to, and they haven't learned. It's like Die Hard. Go back to Die Hard. It's that scene where he's just talking to the cop about donuts and Twinkies and stuff in between these huge action pieces. We
Mhm.
don't have to J.J. Abrams it and go from action piece to action piece to action piece all the time.
Right.
Give
And
characters a
when you
chance.
mentioned Die Hard, the first thing I thought of was him wrapping the bandages around his cut feet, and he's like talking to
Yeah,
himself.
yeah.
He's talking to
Those
himself. He's having a conversation with himself.
Yeah. Sidney Lumet was a remarkable director for actors, and you can see it in this film
Yeah.
with performances. Even the Secretary General who's at the Pentagon and the way he controls that room and says, "Gentlemen, this is what I want," and, da, 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 and the president will do this. And, well, do you think he knows about this? Oh, yeah, he knows. It's just such great performances. And it's because Lumet worked with them so long in developing the characters and how he wanted. And it's really sad this movie didn't get huge attention when it came out. But part of it was the lawsuit and when it was released. Part of it was the struggle they had to do it. The government refused to help them at all for this. So everything that it was actually a good and bad thing. It was bad in that, so they had to make up everything. Like they wouldn't show them pictures of NORAD or SAC or anything, so they had to make that set up and say, this is what we think it might look like. Same thing with the bomber. No video of the bomber. Same thing with rooms at the Pentagon. All that had to be done. But not only did the government say, you can't use any of our resources and we're not going to help you, they went around to rental houses all over Hollywood and said, do not rent to this company by orders of the government. Don't rent them equipment. Don't rent them computers. Don't
And
rent them.
that's so crazy because 1959, 4 or 5 years earlier, they did On the Beach. Of course, that was filmed in Australia, but didn't they have like government cooperation with that? I know they had Australian government cooperation with it, but didn't they have military with that?
Not the United States. They
Not
had,
the United States. Okay.
Right.
So I guess that back then, if you made a war movie that was current, you didn't get cooperation from our government.
Especially if
or
you're
military.
thinking about giving away our ideas. You can't do that sort of
Right.
thing because it was still in the Cold War. They were talking about a very topical.
Well, it was
subject.
after all the Cuban Missile Crisis and all that too.
But the good point of all of that was it led to a really simplistic approach to stuff. So the graphics that they use are very, very simplistic and easy to understand.
Yeah.
You've got a triangle, which is the bomber, and you've got these little pencil things, which are obviously missiles. So you didn't get these incredible graphics or whatever. Instead,
Well, they do it in the
simplistic.
posters too. That's why I put them up behind me. There's very plain font, very bold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And cold. It's very cold, calculating to the point. Even down to, if you notice, except for one shot, and Sidney Lumet in an interview said that was the only shot that they could pirate and get of a fighter jet taking off. And so they cropped it in different ways in processing to make it look like 5 different planes were taking off. And it was only one single shot. But that's the only time you see a realistic shot. Everything else of the planes, you'll notice they're white. They're very, very high contrast white, almost like a graphic.
Yeah.
Because they were taking images that weren't with permission, but the only way they could use them was if they didn't show any markings on the planes. So you see all the when they show the fighter jet like turning and banking and all this, it's not like the model in Strangelove where you see the big bomber and the superimposed background or whatever. These are all like actual aerial footage, but the plane looks like it's white. It's awfully overexposed almost.
Glowing.
So it helped with the tension of the story. And then the only other little trivia thing I have production-wise is an interview with Lumet. They asked him about the ending. Because the endings of both of these movies, like we said, are very drastic, very sharp, very impactful. Kubrick's is this nice sing-songy music with all these nuclear explosions. Lumet's is that horrible screech of the bomb falling and this montage of New York, and everything freezes, zooms in, and then everything ends in white.
Yeah.
And he was quoted as saying, I wanted 10 little pieces of life that were snuffed out in a second. And I went, oh my God. And that's true. It's got the kids doing the hopscotch, and it's got the dancers on the stoop of the brownstone. It's just, it's so
It shows
harrowing.
New York specifically.
Yeah, well, because that's where the bomb is falling.
Right. Like New York streets and that.
Yeah. It's a very, he
I
said
don't
10 little
have-
pieces of life.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of keys, but the one that you just mentioned comes to mind is Halloween. Is that the end of the movie, they do the shots of all the places. It's just a montage of all the places where the killer is. And in this, it's the same. It's not the same theme, but it's the same technique of remember, I said it's very musical where you do dun, 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 exclamation point. Well, it's the same with this when the screen goes white and the words failsafe come up or whatever, just like the word Halloween comes up. Same technique Carpenter used.
Keys that I have, I kept trying to think of, and maybe you can think of some. What are keys where the ending decision, the ending dramatic decision is so startling to the audience, the sacrifice that they're making? And couldn't really think of, but I know there are some. And I'd love to hear if you guys have any out there. Let us know of endings where you saw the twist happen. You went, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing this. And they really do.
The Sixth Sense would be the first one that I can think of.
Well,
Yeah. That blew people away. They did not expect that.
Agreed. That's probably a good twister. But I have several that to me are more fail-safe than Strangelove. One of them, of course, being Hunt for Red October. Again, trying to pursue and stop this what each side thinks of as a bad thing from happening. And this political thriller attitude where you're also in the government, you're also aboard the ship watching what's happening. Yes. By the same token, nuclear, Crimson Tide, of course, because Crimson Tide is a nuclear sub and they are about to start World War III, similar to the Bedford incident. But the one that you might appreciate is War Games.
That's a great one. I had not even thought of it, but yeah, you're right.
Because and I think it's not Fritz Weaver, but it's a Fritz Weaver type character. But War Games is very similar to this. It's the computer gone amok. It's like this meets 2001. So
we just talked about that actor the other day. I can't remember who it is.
But I also have my last two. I have Terminator 2, because her doomsday vision is very similar when they go into the doomsday nightmare that Hurley's character has, with all the buildings blowing up and bombs and all of that. And it's very similar to
Fritz Weaver-like actor you're thinking of is John Wood.
John Wood, yep.
Yeah, he was also in Lady Hawk, the villain in Lady Hawk.
Yeah. And then my last one, which I highly recommend. Have you seen the 2000 live version of this that George Clooney did?
No.
It's excellent. I don't even know if you can find it other than buying or renting the DVD, but I watched it live because it was one of the first live. This was before NBC started doing its live musicals. It was in 2000. George Clooney's in it. He plays the commander of the Vindicator bombers. But like Richard Dreyfuss is the president. Noah Hawley or somebody like that is the interpreter.
Not Noah Hawley. He's a director.
Yeah, Noah.
You're Noah Wiley. You're talking about the guy he's from ER. That's why George Clooney got him, because they work together.
He plays the interpreter, the Hagman character, and Brian Dennehy plays General Bogan.
I love him.
SAC Command.
Yeah,
and it was done live on NBC. They had multiple sets set up all over the studio, and they did it live, and it's really, really a great version of this with its own updated stuff from 62 to 2000.
Now, kids, your homework tonight is to go home and watch this on television.
Yes. And it has been announced that someone is in production of this for a Broadway staging.
Oh, interesting.
Failsafe.
Okay.
So it'd be interesting to see it on Broadway.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of those movies. Like you said, Strangelove was a little more popular upon release. It made money. This one did not. But I think it should be reversed, and it's probably good that people are coming around to it now and re-embracing it since they didn't the first time. That makes sense.
And it's a masterclass in great filmmaking, from character development to framing of the shot, lighting, set design, everything. I love the fact that, like you said in that picture, the Pentagon is this V going backwards. If you look at SAC Command, it's the same way. These towers and these double-sided sets that go back to the elevators in the back of the room. And like you said, when they're underground in the White House, it's like they are thrust into this corner of the room at this table. So I love this movie. I think it's brilliant.
I had one other key, and it also pertains to what I was talking about with Halloween. That montage they do at the end is also extremely similar to the one they do in The Day the Earth Caught Fire, that movie we watched last year.
True.
That double feature.
True.
But that's again, my only other key.
I think, don't they do the same, a similar thing in Day After, where they just show a montage of destruction?
I'm sure that a lot of nuclear movies do that.
Yeah, that would make sense.
I have not seen The Day After probably since I was a kid, but yeah, I have a feeling that's done in a lot of things.
Yeah.
So,
well,
I think
Retro
that does it
Yeah.
for our little nuclear sci-fi double feature, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying, and what is that title?
And Love the Bomb.
And Love the Bomb. I always just call it Dr. Strangelove. And Failsafe, I think we both appreciate these movies. I like Failsafe a little more. I think David does too. Let us know what you think. We would like to know. Have you seen these movies? Are we educating you? Are you going to watch these movies? Maybe you should. Maybe you should have your kids watch them. They might not like them because they're in black and white.
Oh my God.
That's too bad. Anyway, we'd like to thank you for joining us today. We will be back in horror land next week. I can promise you that. If you like what you see here, we have other shows on YouTube other than what's out there on podcast waves. We also have some shows on Patreon that are either subscription-based or non-subscription-based. So you can get your free bonus stuff there, as well as 2 other shows that we do on Star Trek and the X-Files, and we're currently in the production of maybe a 3rd. And until next week, David, I think I will be seeing you, and you're going to hate me.
Oh, no. Oh, no. We'll see.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.